Good evening, Professor Harold.
Hi, pleased to see you again.
And nice to see you again. And we are
Thank
so honored to have you to join our interview again. Now I'll begin. Last time we mainly focused on your blood exchange experiments, and this time we'll shed the spotlight on your book, The Illusion of Knowledge. And I know that you must have prepared a lot of new information to share with us. And by the way, we have already recorded our talk. So before we start, could you please briefly introduce yourself with a few sentences to introduce our audience? Yeah, because some of them haven't seen you last time, maybe missed that time interview. So.
My name is Harold Katcher. I'm a former full professor and actually department chairman at UMUC, University of Maryland. And I'm at this point nearing 80 years old, and my real career began after my retirement when I found, after reading an article, I believed I could rejuvenate people, animals, etc. And I looked for people throughout a decade before I found one person who believed what I wrote. I published articles, and I went to India to conduct research, and there I was successful in actually rejuvenating rats and human skin, my own human skin, as it happens.
Yes.
This is after, by the way,
really amazing. Yeah.
After one treatment 1 year and 8 months ago. I believe I understand something of the aging process more than anyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your brief introduction. So now shall we delve into the questions about your books first? Yes.
Absolutely.
Your book begins by discussing death and various beliefs in different regions, and you use the first story mentioned Mesopotamia, where people didn't believe in death. And what's your intention by starting this book with this story?
Well, I actually started with not so much Mesopotamia as a whole, but with ancient Samaria, probably the first Western civilization, equal in antiquity to Chinese civilization. And it was about one particular man, a king of Uruk, name of a city-state in those days. There were no countries, whose best friend died. And he suddenly realized what death was. And he wanted to find a way to cure or to prevent death. And his story was, it's a very ancient story. So he has the sun passing underneath the earth, and he follows the path of the sun through the region where gods live, where trees have crystal flowers and diamonds and rubies grow on trees. And he finally finds a man who is a descendant, who was actually survived the great flood that supposedly killed all of humanity.
So that he bring the hope of life to human beings, right?
Well, he wanted to bring immortality to human beings. Immortality means no death. The interesting thing is that this fellow whose name I can't remember, it's some strange ancient Mesopotamian name, Utpish, not or something like that, told him first that there was no cure for death, that it was built into the human life. Gilgamesh persisted, and the fellow gave him a challenge. And the challenge was, if you can stay awake for 8 days, I will give you the secret to immortality. You will have the secret to immortality.
So
And
did he get the secret of
he
mortality?
did not get the
Uh,
secret of mortality. And in fact, Upishnat, every time the king fell asleep, Gilgamesh fell asleep, put a circle of stones around him. So when he woke up, he realized that he had been asleep and was unconscious of the fact that the stones were put around him.
okay.
His wife, who is also immortal, there is one thing I can give you,
Mhm.
and and that's knowledge about how to become young again.
So you just mentioned that or in that story that there is no cure, but we may consider and why human beings are doomed to death. Why? What's the cause of death? And Leonard Heffley believes entropy is a cause of death, but some argue that aging is not related to increased entropy. And what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that aging is not caused by increased entropy.
Mhm,
Entropy applies to closed systems. A
mhm,
closed system is a system where neither energy nor mass enters or leaves.
yeah.
Obviously, a human being is not a closed system because energy enters by way of food and leaves by way of action, exertion, etc. So
Mm,
entropy does not apply to living creatures, and there are living creatures that do not die. Very long-lived compared
yeah, they
to
long lived.
animals of their size.
A hydra, I guess, one kind of hydra.
Hydra,
Yes.
planaria
Mhm,
are, and a certain jellyfish known as Turritopsis. Uh, those are immortal animals. In the
mhm,
in the case of the planarian, it has no sexual reproduction. So the only way, and it's been around for millions of years, so the
mhm,
only way it actually reproduces is by being torn in half. One half grows its
mhm,
backside, the other half grows its
yeah.
front side. So the planaria is immortal. So if entropy were indeed a factor of biological life, that couldn't happen. The
Mhm,
interesting thing is about the jellyfish. They call it the immortal jelly, the Turritopsis nutricula. Uh, there are there are there are others. Denori is another species name, but these are interesting animals. Uh, Many people don't know about the life cycle of these animals. They start off as hydra, which are small, very tiny
mhm.
animals
Yes.
that grab food and eat it. But some of their arms actually bud off into what are called medusa, which are
Mhm,
jellyfish. Well, the medusa was a Greek divinity with a hair made of snakes, who,
mhm,
if you even looked at her, you would turn to stone.
mhm.
But
It's different from what you said. Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
the Medusa that I'm talking about is simply the jellyfish because
Oh,
it has all of these long arms that spread out underneath it when it swims. Uh,
okay, I get it.
I didn't make up the term, so
Of course, you didn't make up. I know that.
don't blame
So
me.
how about the oxidative stress?
Wait. So
Okay.
the Medusa eventually gets weaker and weaker, oxidative stress being one cause of that,
Mhm, mhm.
and eventually settles to the bottom. But instead of dying, it becomes a hydra again.
Oh, how?
And
How they become hydra again?
nobody knows. It's a process. They give it a name, but it doesn't matter what the name is. It changes its cellular structure to the
Mhm,
extent that it becomes a hydra again, and then produces new medusa, which
Oh,
again, instead of dying, will settle and become Hydra and then produce new Medusa over and over and over again.
so that's how they can keep immortal,
That's
right?
and that's really my own plan for immortality.
Okay.
Basically rejuvenation, returning to a younger state, growing old, returning to a younger state. And with our rats, we could do that. We've only tried about perhaps five rejuvenations. We managed to produce the world's oldest female rat. We called her
That's fantastic.
Sima, which
Sima.
which which means boundary or a limit, because she exceeded the limit of lifespan, which is
Mhm.
normally about 3 years. She lived to 4 years. And in human terms, it would be equivalent to her living to an age of 160, which is
Quite a
exceeds
long day.
quite a long life. But here's another point. All animals, including humans, all mortal animals, not the immortal ones, have a maximum lifespan. For
Yes.
humans, it's about 120 years. Uh, so our female rat actually exceeded the maximum lifespan of a female rat. I wish we had done studies on what she died of eventually. Her last 4 or 6 months, she was not given any treatments. And
Mhm.
I was in the US at that time, and I'm not really sure why the workers in India discontinued, our scientists in India discontinued giving her injections. My guess is that
Mhm.
her tail got very sore. You give injections into the tail veins, and there's just so many times you can do that because they have tiny little veins, and even a
Little hole.
small, yeah, even with a small diameter, it gets eventually scarred and
Injure like something like that. So
correct,
mhm.
correct.
Uh, okay, so I'd like to know that in your book you mentioned four blood constitutions, and bloodletting is a method to restore such balance, like balance. And I think it's pretty similar with the cupping theory, and like a traditional Chinese medicine may use this method to
My my
cure
mother
people.
my mother used
Yes,
that
and I
method.
do know more about the cupping and bloodletting. Are they effectiveness aligned with each other?
Yes.
Or can this method treat aging?
Um, the conboys use something very similar to
Mhm.
treat aging. They actually extract about half the blood plasma. When you donate plasma, there's a machine that separates the cellular portion of blood from the liquid portion. The liquid portion is called plasma. And this is a very common procedure in the United States and probably in China too. People
Oh,
give plasma centers, and it's mostly broke college students who need some money. It's a harmless procedure, and in fact, there's reason to believe that it might even be beneficial. It's found that people, for instance, who give blood actually live longer than people who donate blood. Uh, so very much like cupping, blood is withdrawn, and when that blood is withdrawn, it's replaced with
mhm.
normal saline solutions, a salt solution, kept at the same pH as blood, pH 7.4. And albumin, human albumin, which is a derivative of blood, is
Mhm.
mixed, make an artificial plasma. Now, the artificial plasma is very simple. Real plasma contains thousands of different molecules, perhaps even tens of thousands of different molecules. but this artificial plasma contains salt, water, and albumin. And they find that it appears to restore youth, although they've never checked it with an epigenetic clock. They've shown tissue samples, that is sectioned through some sort of tissue, that shows that the cells look like young cells. You can tell the difference between young and old cells visually. And so they seem to, and this is something, by the way, and actually, this was first told to me by a Chinese doctor, actually, who used to perform blood, what's called plasma exchange. He said when he'd perform plasma exchange, his patients would suddenly become more vital, seem younger, look younger, more active, but it disappeared in a few days, which is why he wasn't willing to support me.
Oh, so how to continue this kind of effect? Don't let it go within
Well,
days.
what I proposed and what I originally started a company, which I called Teratopsis after the jellyfish, uh, was to just continue with a regular schedule of blood plasma exchanges, hoping that at some point it would stick. Now, this has never been tried.
Mm.
This has never been tried, and I'd really love to try it. However, that's what I originally went to India with, that idea. And we were going to do plasma exchanges on rats. And nobody has done plasma exchanges on rats except one group in Germany. They were supposed to cooperate with us and they never did. And we never got anywhere. And I was about to give up when I thought, well, let's try something else. There must be some factors in blood plasma that cause this rejuvenation. People who saw the first interview know this, but
Mm.
new joiners may not know this. In 2005, the Conboys, who I mentioned before, did an experiment which I'm sure these days would be banned because it's incredibly cruel. Uh, they would
Yes.
they would cut a young rat and an old rat and sew them together so that they shared a common blood circulation. So the old rat and the blood rat's blood would mix.
Mm.
And what happened is apparently the the old rat became younger by all sorts of uh, very
It's okay.
in experiments, you have an experimental group and a control group. It was very
Mm.
well controlled so that they could see that the older rat became younger. Its stem cells multiplied more quickly as they did with young rats. Its immune stem cells, it's an odd thing, but in a young person or rat, the young immune stem cells reproduce slower than the old ones, unlike any other cell type. But it was the same with the treated old partner of these sewn together rats. The process is known as heterochronic, different age, parabiosis, living
Mhm.
together. Um, so we knew that there was something in the plasma of young animals that could rejuvenate old animals. So my idea was to apply this to human beings in such a manner as to the Conboys gave up on this.
Mhm.
And although it was published in Nature, it made no impact on aging science, which is incredible to me.
Yes.
So I said, well, they gave up on it. I didn't read their paper until 5 years after they published it. They published in 2005. I actually read it in 2009. I was working in Japan at the time, and I didn't really have access to.
Yeah.
I
And
was
I noticed that you spend a lot of your experience in the Asian culture in
correct.
Japan. And so you once
I,
likened catabolism and anabolism in the book to yin and yang. This is, I think, is a very fascinating metaphor in Chinese. And how did you come up with this comparison? And
oh, I've been interested in Oriental culture since my college days. I took courses in
mhm.
Oriental. Those are my only non-scientific courses.
Oh, so
Uh,
since that time, you are getting interested in the Oriental culture, right?
yes, I was always interested. I always had Oriental friends. I, I, I just thought there was a lot missing from Western culture that could be learned from these very ancient cultures, such as Chinese culture,
Oh,
which have,
so
yeah.
mhm. Has this exposure to Asian culture influenced your aging research? I'd like to
No,
know.
I can't really say that it has. I approach aging research as a scientist,
Mhm.
not as a philosopher. I'm
So,
not
so
a philosopher. I
okay.
just I just really appreciate Asian culture.
So let's get back to science. So,
Yes.
do you believe reversing epigenetic changes can reverse aging? Mm,
I believe epigenetics, we're all born with approximately the same genes. In
mhm.
fact, almost all mammals have exactly the same or approximately the same number of genes, about 20,000, 24,000 different genes. Now, how those genes are regulated is by epigenetics. So you can have a gene and
Mhm.
never express it in your entire life because there's no switch to turn it on, or there's a switch that constantly keeps it turned off. So epigenetics, and we can also see that the genes that are made as people and animal age are different at different ages. Different genes are turned on, different genes are turned off, and and throughout your life history, there are changes in genes that are expressed and the degree to which they're expressed, how much of them are expressed or not expressed. They can be
Mhm.
turned off or turned on. So the idea of a gene, this is a very old idea. It's more than a century old in any case. Gregor Mendel first thought of them in the late 1800s. Uh, and biologists seem to believe you either have a gene or you don't have a gene, but that's not the case. All animals, basically all mammals, have the same genes. If you look at their DNA, you'll find that even a far distant animal like a rat has 70% of the same genes and has the same number of genes as we do. So epigenetics absolutely can control aging and does control aging. Now, the question people are asking is a particular epigenetic test that they use to determine age, is that actually controlling aging, or is that a byproduct of aging? And nobody can really tell you. There are two schools of thought.
So,
What I do know is that my treatment brought the epigenetic age back to young adult from old adult.
okay. So have you paid attention to reprogramming? I think this
Well,
technology can
I think this is reprogramming.
mhm,
I think this is just nature's way of reprogramming.
kind of natural way of reprogramming.
Correct.
Okay, so at the cellular level, the transcription translation feedback loop can determine when the catabolism occur. Can you explain a little bit this concept to us? Yeah.
I mean, to define for your audience,
Mhm.
transcription is the production of what's called messenger RNA from your DNA. A messenger RNA is like a small section of DNA which controls one or more traits. It actually doesn't, except for certain messenger RNAs, doesn't really control traits at all. It
Mhm.
first has to be translated into a protein. So the messenger RNA is a code, a piece of code, a strip of code, and there's a decoding machine called a ribosome. The ribosome joins to the messenger RNA. It produces a protein based on that particular code the messenger carries with it. And uh, how to describe this? The proteins are what do everything or
Yeah.
almost everything in your body. Your muscle proteins are make it able to contract. That's all muscles can do. The proteins in the back of your eye convert light into electrical energy. Uh, Almost every process is controlled by proteins. Now, here's where it becomes a little bit complicated. So the messenger RNAs are transcribed from DNA, are copied, they're copies actually of DNA in a slightly different substance. And they leave, and they're made in the nucleus of the cell where all your DNA is kept. And through various forms of processing, they eventually leave the nucleus because there are no ribosomes in the nucleus. And they go out into the cell's cytoplasm, the majority of the cell in most cases. And there are ribosomes that make them into proteins, and the proteins themselves have codes which direct them on where to go in your cell. Some go right back into the nucleus, for example. Some go to the mitochondria, some go to the lysosomes. These are different cell organelles, just like we have organs like stomachs and
Mhm.
lungs, etc. Cells have organelles, which means little organs that essentially do the same thing: digestion, oxidation, energy production. It's a
Yeah,
waste
they're like
management.
the little parts, little organs inside the
Correct,
cell. Yeah.
correct. But it turns out that people used to, and many still do ignorantly, scientists I'm talking about, oddly enough, think that what the nucleus produces in the terms of the RNA is what proteins are present in the cell. But that's not often the case because there are intermediaries in the process. Things, for instance, called uh, microRNAs or silencing RNAs that, that prevent a messenger from being translated, or in some cases, just slow down the translation. In some cases, they completely destroy the messenger. So even though you might be making tons of some sort of messenger RNA in the nucleus of the cell, it's not produced at all in the cytoplasm. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of scientists who think that what the nucleus produces is what the cell produces, and it's just not the case. That's an epigenetic mechanism. Epi
That's
means
epigenetic
above.
mechanism
Yeah,
too. So when you assess the aging, I mean, you may assess from the different dimensions, right? I noticed that when you started the research of E5, you initially focused on assessing aging across three aspects, like the biochemical, the physiological, and cognitive levels. That's why.
right,
And now, will you detect aging from more different dimensions in your experiments?
correct. We use what's called an epigenetic clock,
Mm,
where you can take DNA and by noticing certain alterations, and I don't want to get too technical, uh, methylation of, there are four bases in DNA, only four. It's like Morse code only has dots and dashes, yet you could write an entire book in Morse code, even though there's only two letters. By in DNA, there are four letters, and A, T, C, and G, and the C's can be methylated. And when the C's are methylated, in certain areas, they're methylated more with age. In certain areas, they're methylated less with age, or remain unmethylated with age, or hypomethylated, as we say. Hyper means more, hypo means less. So by performing these, by looking at about 450 or so genetic sequences, uh, a fellow named Steve Horvath, who's a
yes,
friend
Steve.
who I greatly respect, um, was able to accurately predict the age of animals just from their DNA. So, and he has all kinds of clocks. Some are tissue specific, so like a liver clock or a lung clock or a brain clock, and some are general. And oddly enough, it turns out these clocks work in just about all mammals. So
It covers
he,
all mammals.
he has what he calls a pan-mammalian clock, where you could hand him a piece of DNA, a large piece of, the entire genome of an animal, and that could be one cell from one of your hairs.
Mhm.
Uh, and he'll put it through his machinery and see which C's are methylated and which are not methylated. A methyl group is a small group of three atoms, pardon me, four atoms, carbon with three hydrogens and a bond that will link it to something else. So, and so he knows how much methylation there is on each of these different 400 something variant pieces of DNA. Then you tell him what species it is. Is it Homo sapiens? Is it Rattus rattus? Is it, I don't know, an elephant, a whale? And he'll tell you the age.
Well, that's really amazing to
Yes,
know all the animals' age just
yes,
by little test. Mhm.
yes. It's not such a little test. The Illumina machine that does the work is about $250,000, but
Oh. So that's not a little test. It's a little bit expensive in some way.
Well, he charges actually about $150
Mm.
per sample if you're interested in knowing your epigenetic age. But nowadays there are companies that actually specialize in it because a lot of people want to know if their chronological age, how old they are from their birth, how many years have passed, is the same as their biological age, which is really what epigenetics, what the Horvath flocks measure.
Yes. We also believe that knowing how old are you, I mean, chronological age is the first step before you
Right,
really can treat and target the aging. Yes.
correct.
So let's jump into the concepts of NAD. And you've also spent a lot of time to explain these ideas in your book. And since this book was published in 2021, has there been any updated understanding regarding like NAD, NADP, and Siutuins?
Um, Not really. Uh, there have been people who have, like David Sinclair, who are selling substances that are supposed to make your body increase its NAD or NADH, its NAD or NADP contents. These NAD is used by your mitochondria for energy transport, electron transport, actually. And NADPH uses the same electrons for production, for making new compounds. So you really need both of them. But as you, NADH is NAD with a hydrogen attached. And that hydrogen has an electron, and that electron is fed into the mitochondrion in where it's used. It's a high energy electron. It has high potential energy. And as the potential energy gets lower, it liberates energy that can be used to power your body, your muscles, for instance. So every time you contract a muscle, you're burning up look, I left out an important point. Uh, the mitochondrion produces energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And when that triphosphate, the last phosphate group, is cleaved off, that releases tremendous energy because all these phosphates are highly negatively charged. And if you can imagine that negative repels negative, in order to put three negative charges together is like compressing a spring because they're all repelling each other. So when you break one off, just like when you release a spring, it releases the stored energy.
It
So
needs huge power to release them.
it any process basically in your body that uses energy, digestion or movement or even vision, requires ATP, and it has a particular site on it that breaks the ATP molecule to release its energy. And then it uses that energy to do whatever task it needs to do. That's every protein that actively uses energy has an ATP site where ATP fits in, it's cleaved, that is broken off, and the energy release is used to move your muscles or create an electric current behind in your optic nerve so you can see, or that's it. In order to make so that's catabolism. where energy is used to do things.
Yeah.
Anabolism is the opposite process, where energy is used to instead of do things, to make things. So DNA has to be made. And in order to make it, you need ATP energy, but that energy is not supplied so much. Well, let me say it differently. In order to make certain molecules, you need to add electrons to them or add hydrogens to them. And that's that's where NADPH comes in. It's used for synthesis of molecules, not for performing work. As you age, the amount of NAD, which is used for producing energy, and it goes down, and the amount of NADH, which is where energy is stored, goes up, but your body can't use it. And on the other hand, the amount of NADPH, which is used for synthesis, goes down. NADPH, which is used for synthesis, goes down. So
So,
it's a somewhat complex process. And
mhm.
actually, NAD can be converted to NADP, but the cell doesn't do that for some reason. It happens all the time. But as we age, the components needed to produce energy go down, as do the components needed to create new molecules. So the question is, when NAD has an electron attached, it becomes NADH. NADH is a potential source of energy, but it cannot carry electrons in mitochondria. You need NAD, just NAD or NAD plus, as they call it,
Mhm.
to be able to accept an electron and carry it to the mitochondria. Instead of being carried to the mitochondria, it just starts accumulating. So you get less NAD plus and more NADH as you age in every cell. And the opposite happens with NADP, because in order to produce molecules, it has to be NADPH in order to synthesize new molecules. And that the levels of NADPH go down and the levels of NADP plus go up. It's in every aging animal,
Okay, I get
mammal,
it.
reptile. It's it's real difficult. I hope people kind of understand what's happening, but this is
Okay,
what
thank you.
happens in aging.
Yes, thank you for explaining such complicated concept to us.
I,
Well,
I,
let me
I, I
start it.
have to tell you that
Uh-huh.
if I were teaching a college class, this would be several lectures. So to
Yeah.
try to fit it into this little space is difficult. Aging
Oh,
is a process that nature produces for a specific purpose. And the specific purpose is that if you die, your children are more evolved than you are because they've been selected for. You've been selected for to have children. So uh, animals die in order that their offspring can live. If they didn't die, there'd be no offspring, no change, and we'd all still be amoebas or planarians. But death allows change to occur. It allows evolution to occur. Without death, there's no evolution. The planaria of 1,000,000 years ago is the same as the planaria of today. The human of 1,000,000 years ago is different. Certainly the dog is the wolf 1,000,000 years ago, but now it's a dog. Yeah. So and there's an interesting correlation. The time it takes from conception, when an egg is fertilized, to sexual maturity, and the maximum lifespan of an animal are correlated. So that in the case of, for instance, I believe reptiles, that the time from when it's a fertilized egg till it's sexually mature is 1/4 of its maximum lifespan. And it's the same for all classes of vertebrates. Vertebrates are animals with backbones. So in humans, it's a little bit different, but it's a formula so that you can plug in the age from conception to sexual maturity. That is about, I know Chinese measure age differently. They measure it from conception, the time that the egg was fertilized. We measure it from birth. But basically, we're talking about 15, 14 years or so in human beings. And the maximum lifespan is 120. So the factor is about 9, I guess, in human beings. So 9 times the period from sexual maturity in mammals, in all mammals. So if a mammal has a very short time from conception to sexual maturity, it has a very short lifespan. And that's true of all mammals. Bats are one of the exceptions. They have a higher ratio of conception to sexual maturity, and their lifespan is higher than would be expected. I don't know why. Nobody knows why.
Okay, so I think we may leave some time for our audience to ask some questions. Um, okay, so the first question I've collected is that someone asked resilience, something about resilience. They think that resilience is very crucial for staying young. And so the question is, how can we obtain and maintain resilience?
Let me show you something. This is my right hand. I can see it in the screen. If I push my skin up, you'll notice how wrinkled it is, and you'll notice that the wrinkles appear to persist. They stay there. You can see this one over here. Can you?
Yes.
I'm afraid
yes, I can see that. I can see that. If you push it.
My rejuvenated hand, it doesn't happen. There are no wrinkles, and it doesn't stay like that. This hand is much more resilient. This hand is all discolored because if I just bang against the door jamb or my desk, I'll develop bleeding underneath my skin. This hand is colored evenly because it's much more resilient. The skin is thicker, and skin has 3 layers. There's the epidermis, which is the basically the top of your skin. the dermis, which has all the blood vessels, etc., and the hypodermis, which makes your skin stick to your bones and muscles. Here, the hypodermis is very, very weak and very thin, because you can see that the skin really doesn't stick very, very well to my muscles. Here, the hypodermis is thick because it does stick. Yes, resilience is a very important factor. And when we rejuvenate animals, we rejuvenate their resilience.
So how can we obtain and maintain resilience? By supplements or?
People have tried supplements.
Mhm.
David Sinclair that I talked about actually convinced some pharmaceutical company to produce his product. It was called RN, ribonucleoside
It's
nucleotide,
okay. It's okay.
ribose dinucleotide. Any case, whatever it was a supplement. It was supposed to increase the amount of NAD in your cells. And he actually got several $100 million for this and made a factory to produce it, and it had no effect. So
Okay.
the factory is gone, etc. They're, I tell you the truth, I do take supplements.
Wow. So many supplements.
Yes, and I don't have very much faith in them. But
And
at 80 years old, I feel it's my life's mission to make rejuvenation possible for everyone. And so I just want to keep myself alive to be able to do that.
okay. So next question, I see one also about supplements, and it asks like, which one of the supplements do you think is the most effective? And how about rapamycin? Because it's quite hot and popular medicine for now.
Yeah, rapamycin, uh, tell you the truth, my ex-CEO takes rapamycin regularly. Um, Honestly, he doesn't look any younger to me. um, I can't. There's a fellow called Blasconi, a Russian, who says this is it, the ultimate cure to aging. And if that were true, we would see it happening because, as you say, there are many, many people who take it. And I don't see it happening.
So you don't believe it could be a very effective anti-aging medicine?
Correct. I,
Oh,
I, I believe it might slow down aging. It certainly won't reverse aging, and that's what I'm looking for. All of these supplements that I'm taking, theoretically at least, slow down aging. There are systems in your cell that determine whether you're going to use a lot of energy for growth or you're going to use that energy for repair. And rapamycin changes the system so that, oddly enough, even though you're not growing, most of your energy is put into the growth pathway, which is just a waste, instead of the repair pathway, which could help your cells become more youthful. And rapamycin changes it so that more energy is put into the repair pathway than into the growth pathway. It affects an enzyme called mTOR.
yes,
mTOR is a kind of funny name because it means a mammalian target of rapamycin. So rapamycin was discovered first and the enzyme was discovered second. But it's quite an important enzyme that controls the rate of aging.
Mhm.
So it seems that that rapamycin can slow down aging, and I hope for all of those people who are taking it that it works. I haven't seen anything that I consider definitive proof.
Okay,
Uh, and
thank
and
you.
I'm not interested in slowing down aging. I'm interested in reversing it.
So the next question is about, do you support treating aging as a whole? I think it's
Yes.
about or one step by step.
You know, if you have say a disease like flu, do you know what flu is?
Yes.
Influenza. You had to kill a lot of chickens in China because of flu. Um, so flu has a lot of symptoms. It has a cough. It has headaches. It has muscle aches. It has. If you treat each of those symptoms, treat the muscle aches with aspirin, headaches with ibuprofen, um, cough with decongestants and cough suppressants. You're not really treating the disease. You're just treating the symptoms of the disease. My idea is to treat aging as a disease. You could think of it as a disease with 100% fatality rate. Uh, but I want to get to the source of aging and change aging back to youthful levels, to change your epigenetic age back to youthful levels. Uh, and while I do that, I also change your cognitive abilities, your muscular strength. Your resilience is certainly is the opposite of frailty. When people get old, they become frail and their muscles just don't work as well. They lose muscle mass, of course, but even the muscle mass they have just doesn't work as it ought to. I've I've managed to I've managed to keep you know, a bit of muscle by
Yeah.
exercise, of course,
Oh,
um, but not by my treatment. I wish I had enough to do that, but I will.
I think exercise is quite significant for
Oh,
all.
exercise is absolutely more, exercise and food are probably the two most important aspects of slowing down aging, not so much supplements, but
Mm.
but regular exercise, at least 4,000 steps a day, and some sort of high impact exercise. I have I have these weights.
Oh,
So yeah, exercise is important and food is important. Uh, and online you can find lots of information about both of those. And that's recognized by all medical authorities, at least here in the United States. Uh, so much more important than supplements are regular exercise and a good diet.
there's a new question. One of them is very interested about your current and future plan about your blood exchange experiments.
Yes.
The
It's not blood exchange. And this is the part that
plasma.
this is the no, not plasma either. This is the part that I forgot to tell you. And it's very important. So let me include it. When we tried working with rats and I couldn't perform plasma exchange because we didn't have the equipment,
Mhm.
I thought to myself, what is the component of plasma that produces youthfulness? And unlike every other scientist in the world, I believe that it was these large molecules and what they call nanoparticles that serves as the epigenetic mechanisms of aging. So I isolated that portion of the plasma containing these very large molecules. Not even molecules, they're complexes, they're structures, they're nanoparticles. If you know what a nanometer is, it's one billionth of a meter. So these are very tiny structures, maybe 50 to 150 nanometers across, and some may even be smaller. So, but they're much larger than proteins. They have molecular weights of about 6 million Daltons. The Dalton is the weight of a hydrogen atom at the minimum. And the largest proteins are on the order of maybe 1 million. So they're much larger than the largest proteins. And I isolated those and I injected it into rats. And at that point, I had to leave India because my visa expired. And then I got an email saying it worked. And
That was good news.
yes, that was very good news. In ways I hoped it wouldn't have worked because I hate traveling back and forth to India. But it's 21 hours in the air, and
Right.
I thought, okay, I'll just die and that'll be the end of it. But 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 fate didn't have that in store for me. So I continue working now harder than ever and
Yeah,
publish more than I ever have in my life at age 80 approximately. I'll be 80 June 22nd. Uh,
I think I
and
really respect that. I really respect your spirit for pursuing
well,
the immortality to humanity. And once you mentioned your dream about to honor Howard Katcher who brought immortality to mankind, that's very touching, impressive for me at that moment.
yeah, it was to me too. It changed my life. Uh, yeah, so I continue working harder and harder, and I've quit my former company, uh, and I'm forming a new company because I didn't think they were going in the right direction and following my advice. So I wanted to put my advice first instead of some CEO.
Yes, I think you did the right thing. Yes.
Well, most people do actually.
Thank you very much. Though I'm not willing to, but due to the time limitation, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. And I like to quote the last sentence of your book to end this interview, because I do believe that humankind will be immortal in heaven, though in ways the ancients couldn't imagine. And I believe
Right.
that maybe after death, even after death, we can be immortal whenever. Who knows?
Yes, I agree. I'm not so sure that people would love true immortality. After the first billion years, things would start to get kind of boring. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I
Well,
hope we'll see. It is certainly
thank
my plan. At the very least, let me just end by saying simply to get your youth back in old age after you've worked all your life. You've been made promises about retirement and enjoying yourself, and then you find your body is falling apart and you really don't enjoy anything. To be given back that youth again, that alone would be worth it. That alone would solve so many problems. Uh, medical care, etc., because that should prevent the diseases of old age, and then even things like cancer and diabetes, etc. So, but I'm hoping it will. I'm sure it will eventually lead to immortality, or the possibility of let's say immortality, because you can always die in a bus hits you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, at least we can extend our health lifespan as long
exactly,
as enough.
exactly, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And may you be happy and healthy every day.
Yes, I hope that for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And looking forward to the future interactions. And I may call the end today.
Pleasure to speak to you always.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.